Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War Frontline update for the 9th of October 2023. Let's go to our frontline and we'll start with my map key. Please pause the video if you want to know what is going on with the lines on my map and how it works. We're going to look, first of all, at a just general claim that involves a couple of places, so I'll just throw this out first. The General Staff spokesman for the Ukrainian forces, Andriy Kovalev, said that during offensive operations, the Ukrainians had partial success in the area north of Capani and north of Novoprokopivka, and also west of Lvov. He also mentioned success northwest of Klishchivka and east of Andriivka. So we'll come to those places a little bit later. We're going to start in the northeast. That is this sector from Kupiansk to Svatova to Kreminna. As you can see, there are no changes to the territory as according to any of the mappers I refer to. Thank you so much to JR for clearing up the polygons here. So we should have just the red, the blue, and when we get their yellow lines, and this white line is the prior to the counteroffensive line. This gives you an indication of how far they've come or not come. I'm actually going to turn that off for the time being just to give us a bit of clarity there. Right, okay, so let's go to OSINT Technical here saying Eastern Makivka, Ukrainian forces from the 66th Mechanized Brigade destroyed a Russian T-90 M with an ATGM. So this is a modern tank being taken out with an ATGM. Where is this active? Well, this tank was geolocated to this position. Now there are claims that the Russians have made advances in this area over the past few days. We're just going to geolocate where this tank is, see what that tells us. And here it is. So Makivka is just north of Kreminna. So we've got Kreminna, we've got Svatova. This is the area where the Russians have been seen to advance. That tank was taken out between where Andrew Perpetua has the Russian defensive lines and where Surak Maps has the defensive lines. That actually supports both of these. It sounds a bit odd, but it could be that the Russians control this area and a tank is operating behind their lines, or the Russians robustly control this area and a tank is being sent out to do an attack, as you would expect. So both of those are completely plausible. The ATGM could be sent from within the grey zone quite easily. So broadly speaking, the line's going to be somewhere around there. ISW says of Makivka that here we have, so geolocated footage posted on October the 7th shows that Russian forces have advanced along a road east of Makivka, Luhansk Oblast, to positions just under 2 kilometers from the outskirts of the settlement. So the settlement is here, 2 kilometers is this far, so that is, so that is 3.5 kilometers. Let's see where 2 kilometers would be. Okay, so that's about 2 kilometers. So the ISW says that the Russians are 2 kilometers from Makivka. They're going to be 2 kilometers from the outskirts of Makivka. So yeah, that's about where you'd expect that tank to have been. Okay. Russian mill bloggers made competing claims about Russian advances near Makivka. One mill blogger claimed that Russian forces reached the outskirts of the settlement. Another said they were 600 meters from the settlement. And another one claimed they're over 1 kilometer from the settlement. All inconsistent with what the ISW have said, which is they're about 2 kilometers from the settlement. Okay, there are lots of claims about Makivka. Another mill blogger claimed that Russian forces made unspecified advances near this settlement, and that Russian forces' ultimate aim is to push the Ukrainian forces to the west bank of the Oskil River, an objective that Russian forces are likely too degraded to achieve in the near term, and I generally agree with that. So this is the idea that the Oskil River, that's all the way over here, the Russians are trying to push all the way to there and to push the Ukrainians back over the river. I can't for a minute think that the Russians are able to do that with their present military situation. If you think that how difficult it's going to be making these sort of gains and how much equipment they end up losing, we've seen that up in Novoherivka and surrounding areas. There are still reports of activity up in the Sinkivka area. There are lots of reported activity along here, but not huge successes. So the ISW Says that Yevlash, who's a spokesperson, stated the Russian forces have increased their use of aviation on this axis, it's Kupiansk to Liman direction, to support increased offensive operations in these areas and compensate for the lack of artillery. So while there's quite a bit of activity, a lot of talk of Sinkivka and places to the north here, up here, Sinkivka, they are using aviation here, as I've said over the last few weeks. They're using a whole load more FAB 500 bombs dropped from aviation somewhere behind the line, and that will be, well, Yevlash is claiming that is because they have a lack of artillery, and we've seen a massive degradation of Russian artillery over time. They're complaining themselves about a lack of counter battery fire, which is where you calculate where the opposition is firing their shells at you from artillery, because you can track the trajectory of the shells, and then you calculate the exact position of where they came from, and then you hit that position with your own artillery. That's called counter battery fire, and there's a lack of that for the Russians at the moment in certain areas of the front line, according to Russians themselves. And I would suggest that there's a lack of artillery in many places because of degradation the Russians have suffered, and as a result we are seeing an increase in aerial bombardments, and that fits in with that kind of theory. Yevlash has said previously, defenders of the anti-tank company, the 66th Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, destroyed 25 enemy tanks in just 4 days. And that is this area. Among them was a T-90 tank. All the tanks were destroyed in Liman direction. So that's the idea that 25 tanks have been destroyed in this area of in this area of the front line over the past 4 days. So it's been, if you can believe the Ukrainian General Staff here, it's been an incredibly expensive axis for them in terms of loss of equipment, and they may have made some gains around the Makivka area, but it's not, particularly significant. Different claims as to what gains are made. Here, Tim White says Russia reports a large Ukrainian counterattack in Kupiansk area has been repelled. The Kremlin's MOD claims that 2 mechanized and tank brigades of the Azov fighters were pushed back. I don't have any details of that, whether that is just complete nonsense or whether that is true. I don't know, but that would be the Kupiansk direction. We have seen claims of the Ukrainians pushing the Russians back here, but that was more of a mapping rejig, I think, from Surak maps. Andrew Perpetua never had that under Russian control. Other than that, I've not seen any other claims of large-scale Ukrainian attacks in this area, but bear that in mind, it might be happening. The Russian MOD have claimed it. Right, and then we come down further south of Crimea. There's been activity in Torska area, Serebyansky Forest has been active, and we are going to now come down to the North Bakhmut area, where here, as you can see, the Russians have made some gains just around the Vasily area. This is pointed out by, or claimed at least by, Surak maps. It says that north of Soledar, Russian army continues advancing northwest of Berestova along the railway, along which it managed to capture some high positions of the Ukrainian army. That's according to them. There's been some fighting up and down this railway line for a long time. Russians way back lost quite a bit of mechanized equipment along there. But over the last week, we have seen claims from, particularly Surak maps and pro-Russian sources, that they have pushed on and made some gains along here. And you can see that reflected in Surak maps mapping line for the Russian defensive line being very different in this area to Andrew Perpetua's. Andrew Perpetua not ready to make that claim. However, he uses a lot of satellite imagery, and the weather has been pretty dodgy and getting worse. So there's a lot of cloud cover. So you may... Surak maps may well be justified in those claims, and Andrew Perpetua may be lagging due to that satellite imagery issue. I don't know at all. I'm just giving explanations why there might be a difference there at the moment. If we come down to the ISW, the American military think tank, they say another Mill blogger reported that fewer significant Ukrainian movements in this area, the Bakhmut area, due to deteriorating weather conditions and heavy rain, which is inhibiting the use of aerial reconnaissance. Well, that fits in with the satellite imagery being, short on the ground, really, or in the air. So that's the Berestova area, and then into Bakhmut itself. Well, let's have a general look with what Null Report says. Bakhmut, Kurdy, and Mivka, that is to the south of Bakhmut. We will mention these northern areas in a second, but as most activity is taking place to the south of Bakhmut along the railway line that skirts Klishchivka, then comes down past these reservoirs and then through Andriivka or past Andriivka and into Kurdyumivka. Now, Deep State Map, who I map in this settlement, has some gains for the Ukrainians around these water features over the railway line, pushing the Russians back there. Just sort of there, it did go diagonally, sort of like that, and they pushed the Russians back, at least according to them. No report says fighting continues northwest of Klishchiivka and east of Andriivka. So that is to the northwest. So that's going to be around this area here. And then around Andriivka as well, both north and south of Andriivka, there's been a lot of activity. Russians have pulled up reserves, but are facing a problem of high casualties due to counter-battery fire, which I talked about counter-battery fire, and there are many claims of very high losses for the Russians in this area. Some losses for the Ukrainians; they are losing a lot, but some really heavy losses for the Russians. The Ukrainians are conducting offensive operations east of the railway tracks too, as well. So there is some activity taking place there that's generally seeing the Ukrainians have some success. It's slow and grinding, but they do have the momentum there. The ISW says a Russian mail blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces are trying to bypass Kurdyumivka from the northeast and attacking in the direction of Zelenopilia. That is something we have seen. So we go back there. We've got Kurdyumivka here, where they were trying, I think, to attack across the canal, where there are these tunnels there. They can get across the canal easily. Easily if you weren't being hammered by small arms fire, mortars, grenade launchers, and artillery. They're also attacking down from the north, but this is a claim that they're going to try and cut off Kurdyumivka by coming from here, from the kind of northeast, around behind Zelenopilia, and then you've got these kind of mineral quarry type areas that I believe, might be involved in some activity at the moment. Right, going back to what the RSW is saying, the Mill blogger noted that Ukrainian forces have shifted their efforts towards Kurdyumivka in order to capture the remaining tactical heights south of Bakhmut. Another Mill blogger, I've said that already. Then we're going to go just dip into the north here. A Russian Mill blogger claimed that Russian forces are counterattacking on the northern flank of Bakhmut. So we had heard previously that the Russians are counterattacking there, that they're concentrating a little bit here. Again, this is this question. I mean, this could be the northern flank here rather than over here in Dubova-Vasilivka and Orokova-Vasilivka, although there's activity there too. This is the question I've been asking recently is, do you do these distraction attacks to pull the Ukrainians from elsewhere to stop them attacking elsewhere, or do you use those troops where the Ukrainians are attacking? It's almost two sides of a square. And I guess if you're going to attack and gain more momentum here, it's maybe less attritional than if you're just going to throw your troops into defending a particular position. Possibly. I don't know. That rationale really works, to be honest. But anyway, that's what the Russians are doing, according to Russian sources, counterattacking the northern flank, and they're pushing Ukrainian forces back near Bakivka, towards Dubova-Vasilivka and Yakovlivka. So according to the Russian sources they're pushing Ukrainians back in the Bakivka area, which is, just here by the Bakivka reservoir, around here in Dubova-Vasilivka area, and then Yakovlivka as well, which is back up here towards Brestovo, where we're talking about. But whether it is up there or over this way, it's hard to know. It's a little bit vague there. So that is the situation in Bakhmut. We're going to come out of Bakhmut now and go down to Avdiivka. Just on the way down there's some gains for the no, there isn't. No, I'm getting myself completely confused. But yeah, we're coming down to Avdiivka. There are gains here in the south of Avdiivka, just north of Spartak. For the Russians, they are pushing up a tree line. They've pushed up a tree line here towards the main road and appear to have purchased across that main road, as according to Surak maps. Russian mapper says, wrong on that. So we'll go to Avdiivka. Surak map says, situation north of Donetsk. The Russian army has advanced north of the Donetsk mine. Budovka Donetsk mine, and managed to capture Ukrainian positions in the M30 road south of Avdiivka, which marks the first advance on this axis since 2022. So you have the old lines there, and then they're sort of moving up from them. If we look at my lines, we'll get some idea of this. The purple line on my map is the annexation line. So you can see here they're just starting to move up from that old annexation line. Certain areas have been pushed back. Broadly, I mean, to say they haven't moved past this axis is a very localized claim, because there are other areas that they've claimed to have got over. But broadly, in this kind of area, they are in line with the axis. The annexation line. Now, that is Surak maps. Haven't seen that claim from Andrew Perpetua yet. We'll see what the ISW has to say. So, Stupun, who is another spokesperson, reported that Ukrainian forces repelled 20 Russian attacks near Avdiivka, on the northwestern outskirts of Donetsk city, near Pervomaisky, on the southwestern outskirts near Mariinka, Krasnohorivka, and Novomykhailivka. So that sounds like a lot of attacks, 20 attacks, but that is going from there all the way down to here. So that's a very large range to allow for those attacks. So nonetheless, there is certainly a lot more heated around here than it has been recently. Stupun also noted that Russian attacks in the Avdiivka and Mariinka directions are meant to distract Ukrainian forces and prevent the transfer of Ukrainian reserves to Zaporizhia direction. That gives some of the rationales to what they're doing here, which is fixing the Ukrainian troops so that they don't support the troops, the efforts down in Zaporizhia. This is what we see from both sides. It's like Bakhmut is fixing Russian troops there so they don't go and support Zaporizhia, and Donetsk is the Russian forces attacking to fix the Ukrainian forces so they don't go and support Zaporizhia. So, yeah, one half doesn't need the other. Here we have in northern Mariinka, Surak maps making some claims of gains for the Russians there, as you can see by this image. So, after a week of intense combats, they say, Russian army managed to make small advances north of the town of Mariinka. And, yeah. We come to some geolocated claims here. So we're going to go back up to Spartak for a second. Location north of Spartak. Here we have the Ukrainians hitting Russian armor in the area with some loitering munitions. A Russian dugout gets hit by drone. Not armor in this one, sorry. That's another one that has 4 pieces of armor. This is a dugout getting hit. So this dugout is... geolocate it. This obviously will give us an idea of where the Russians are in that Spartak area. It behaves itself. There we go. Right. So back up to there. Yeah. So that is the dugout, and that's what Surak Maps is using to make that claim. So it appears like Surak Maps has some justification for that claim. There appears to be Russian dugouts being hit there. So I'd expect Andrew Perpetua, possibly Deep State Maps, to reflect that in their next mapping update. Let's go and show Deep State Map. They seem to have been not on here at the moment, but now the yellow lines are there. Yeah, you can see that broadly following the prior counter-offensive lines. Yeah, down here we have gains for the Russians. Sorry, all my phones are going off at the moment. That's why my brain just suddenly went, wah. Anyway, brain's back on it. Right, so that's Avdiivka area. Some gains for the Russians in Mariinka, as mentioned. And there's activity, I think, around Novomykhailivka, but also Vuhledar. There are some claims that the Ukrainians are attacking in the Mikhailska area, but the Russians are attacking the Vodyani direction. Now, that could be from Novomykhailivka area over here. It's quite annoying sometimes when they say in a certain town's direction and they pick somewhere that's miles away from anywhere. And you're like, well, that doesn't really help me there. So anyway, we'll go to what the ISW has to say. Which is that, yeah, you've got Ukrainians attacks northeast of Mikhailska, west of Novodonetsk, and west of Staromayorska. There's a number of places they are pushing. Mikilska there, and then we're going all the way over towards the west to Staromylska and Novodonetska, so west of there. So somewhere around here, the Ukrainians are pushing, as well as in an unspecified forest area belt somewhere around here, as well as active around Priyutne as well, just there. So there's a little bit of activity going on in this sector, which is interesting because that has kind of really quietened down as a result of potentially troops being moved to the west to help the Zaporizhia area, the Robotina area. Anyway, a Russian mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces unsuccessfully attacked an unspecified forest belt, likely west of Staromylska, are trying daily to improve positions north of Prutine with decreasing intensity, and are attempting to regain lost positions west of Novodonetsk. As I just mentioned, the UK MOD assessed that the Velika Novosilka sector of the front line has been relatively quiet for 4 weeks, which it clearly has. I mean, that much is obvious. The question is why. Okay, Russian forces counterattacked in western Donetsk and in the Donetsk-Zaporizhia Oblast border area on October, that's Priyutne kind of area, on October the 8th, but did not make any confirmed territorial gains. A Russian mill blogger claimed that Russian Spetsnaz and motorized rifle units have captured almost a dozen Ukrainian positions and pushed Ukrainian forces from an unspecified strategically important settlement. They claim, of course, push them from a settlement. I mean, what's going on? We do have claims down here further to the west of gains. Actually, I've got that in the wrong color. That should be an Andrew Perpetua gain there, so that it should be a lighter red, because actually this composite polygon there, 2 rectangular areas have been taken broadly. Well, actually it comes down there. It was going along there, so now they've got that part of that field and that part of that field under Russian control. So they are pushing from Marfapil area towards Chervona. That is happening, so I don't know whether that's this kind of unspecified area of advance they're talking about there. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that Ukrainian forces repelled 10 Russian assaults near Vodyane, that's what I was talking about earlier, and Zolotoneva near Velika Novosilka. So there are Russian attacks in this general area, but exactly where, I don't know. So we're going to move to the west and really where it's all kind of happening. Let's look at some of the sources. So War Gonzo's early update yesterday. Remember, I haven't done this for 2 days, so there's a bit of catching up. With artillery support, the Ukrainians advanced towards Capani, west of Robotina. There is progress. In the Bakhmut directions, this is coming from a pro-Russian source, and progress would mean progress for the Ukrainians here. In the Bakhmut direction, the AFU, the Ukrainians are attempting to break through to Zelenopilya in order to bypass Kurdimivka from the northeast, which we've heard already. Artillery is hitting Russian positions, and Russian troops try to counterattack in Andriivka and Klishchivka. So that's War Gonzo saying that. Right, okay, now more particularly for here in the Kopani area that we were just, War Gonzo just mentioned, that's this area here. So we have Novoprokopivka, we have Robotina. The Ukrainians have control of Robotina and are trying to push south through some pretty tricky trench lines here that they've got caught up on into Novoprokopivka. Various claims about them being in or on the outskirts of the town, maybe pushed back, bit of back and forth there. Whilst there's also fighting along these trench lines towards Verbove, but there's more recently been quite a bit of activity between Novoprokhovka, a different place than Novoprokopivka, and Verbove here in this general area. The Ukrainians have had some success according to Deep State map. So this bulge came out here, and they've pushed the Russians back according to them in this area. So that could be useful for trying to get down to Verbove from the north and split that from Novoprokhovka. But quite a lot of talk about what's going on in Karapani area as the Ukrainians are pushing from the northeast, but also I think a little bit from the east too. You can see that there are some trench lines there between Robotina and Capani, and it may be a case of moving down the trench lines as well as coming in from the north. Right, let's go back to those sources. So Surak map says, situation in Zaporizhia front, unable to advance in Robotina salient, the Ukrainian army is slowly putting the focus on nearby Capani, in which troops managed to make some advances northeast of the town. That seems to be quite true. They are struggling to advance too quickly in Novoprokopivka area. It is bit of a slow grind. In the Novopokrovka-Verbove area, actually Capani again, north of Capani, says Null reports, the Ukrainians have made gains towards the town itself. The goal is to create a bigger buffer on the western flank of Robotina and simultaneously hit the rear of Nestoryanka. Okay, so you got Nestoryanka up there. It could be, have a twofold advantage for coming in here to attack Karapani from two directions, but also partially surround Nestoryanka. The Ukrainians have needed to widen their salient so they don't get into trouble in the middle here where it's quite vulnerable from both sides. You need to widen that salient to look something like that, and then you can supply your troops with greater ease. So this is just a massively defended area. Let's talk about Tokmak being even more defended now. So we'll come to a quote in a second that it's like a fortress. So anyway, let's go and have a look at I'm sure in that somewhere. I think it's in the ISW. We'll come down to now. So geolocated footage published on October the 8th indicated the Ukrainian forces made limited advances along the T0408 highway on Novopokrovka's northern outskirts. This is the geolocated footage. So you've got Ukrainian infantry units spotted and targeted by artillery fire north of Novopokrovka, just 300 meters away from the first buildings in the town. So it's a geolocation of Ukrainian units in sort of in movement, actually, not dug out or anything. So here we go. That in. And we'll see where the Ukrainians have been spotted. So that's interesting because that is behind Surak's Russian defensive line, but in front of Andrew Perpetua's Russian defensive line. So that would suggest that in this case, Andrew Perpetua seems to be a little bit more accurate there, and that the Ukrainians are pushing still down. And that's interesting because they are south of these trench lines, so it could be that the Ukrainians now have more robust control. There was talks about these ones on the left of your map here being under Russian control and Ukrainian control and Russian control, and so it seems to be quite a difficult job for them to have taken control of those. ISW then says Millblogger observed that Russian forces have been unsuccessful in cutting off the flanks of Ukrainian forces advancing towards Novopokrovka and Verbove throughout the week, but that Ukrainian forces did not make significant advances themselves. Another Russian Millblogger claimed that intense battles are ongoing on the Robotina-Verbove line, and the Russian artillery fire has repelled two Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance groups northwest of Verbove. That would be northwest of Verbove would be here. Some repelled attacks there. Well, it appears that actually the Ukrainians have gained some ground, at least according to the Deep State map. So lots of activity going on there. It is slow though, and this leads to all the conversations we've been having about, are the Ukrainians going to necessarily have to just slow down, keep kind of prodding and probing, but really use their distance ordnance and drones that they have some kind of advantage over the Russians to degrade the Russian forces in this area and in all the areas really. The Russians, on the other hand, can use aviation much more effectively to their advantage. So there is a bit of a leveler there, I guess. Right. We're going to go. We do have something to say. Just to remind you, I said, I saw there was someone talking about Tokmak. I might be just below here. Yes, Ukrainian terrorist group of forces spokesperson Stupin has stated that Russian forces continue to strengthen their defenses around Tokmak, and the city has become a fortress surrounded by circular defensive lines. And this is true. It is a really difficult place. It would be a really difficult place for the Ukrainians to take, but thing is, the Ukrainians don't really need to take it. All they need to do is get down to around here and be in control of this kind of area. And once they're in control of that kind of area, they can get fire dominance over the highway that comes in, the M14 highway, which for some reason is not here. So let's add it. There you go. You can see it now. So it comes along the coast here. They are around Tokmak, as I've said many times before. They can hit that by Mars. So that's less than 60 kilometers away. So you can imagine that if you've got your HIMARS, if you successfully taken all this area, then HIMARS would be relatively safe there, and it means you can hit the coast pretty much from there. And that's really, that would be the success. But the success of this counteroffensive, I know there were early talks about getting down to the Sea of Azov. Then that was soon, put paid to with the stiff resistance the Russians have created and the fortifications they built. Then it's like, okay, we need to get to Tokmak, and even that is looking difficult. But all they need to do really is be able to get to a position where they can fire HIMARS at this road. Then things are looking better for the Ukrainians. Right, we're going to go on to Kherson now. Here, the head of GUI, Kirilo Budanov, has confirmed that SSO units tried 3 times to land on the left bank of the Dnipro in order to create a bridgehead for the liberation of occupied Enerhodar and the nuclear power plants. Fighters landed near Enerhodar but could not gain a foothold. So this isn't going right along the river as we know it, but this is more of the reservoir, which is now really a basin for the river. There is no reservoir, but yeah, Ukrainians have attempted a number of times to land here. We know that back in November last year they attempted an amphibious assault and were pushed back because this is really heavily defended. Very difficult for the Ukrainians to get a foothold on that particular site. Where they've tried to get their foothold in those 3 attacks, I don't know, but that's coming from Budanov, the head of intelligence. And really, we're going to come down now and look at the area around particularly Antonivsky Bridge. So you've got Kherson here, you've got the Antonivsky Bridge, where the Ukrainians still have this foothold. And there are some gains according to Andrew Surak map, but I couldn't quite work out whether it's just we hadn't got the mapping right for some time or whether this is a new thing, because we don't often look with a fine-tooth comb at the Kherson, at the Dnipro River Delta, because it's really been very unchanging, and so you just wait to hear of things and then make changes. Yeah, give it a quick cursory look now and again, but I saw that this area here, basically like that, is different. So I don't know whether that signifies something that's happened over the last few days or rejigging or what. If we go to Andrew Perpetua's map of the area, I think it might be quite useful just to see the control on this riverbank. I don't know why it's come up with that version. That's just changed. Never mind. Right, so here we have his map, and it shows you all the strikes that take place within the Kherson area. But you can see the control, areas of control. It's mainly grey zone along here, but there are areas of control for the Ukrainians along the Konka River there, and then around the Antonivsky Bridge area, and then up here where they did have some around the Kozachi Lahiri area. They did have some foothold there by all accounts, but that seems to have gone by the wayside. But further along the river in that area, they have a foothold, and yeah, there's various talk about footholds along the Dnipro River. So we'll look at a few other sources shortly. Here we have Surak map saying, without a map here, just a bit of a comment. Situation on the Kherson front, the Ukrainian army expanded the control around the Dachi settlement where troops launched skirmishes against the Russian army positions north of Tyrpinsk. In addition, more deep reconnaissance groups are landing on the southern shore of the Dnipro River. So that's interesting. We have this Dachi area. I don't know what's going on with these browsers at the moment. So this is the Dachi area just by the Antonivsky Bridge, across from Oleshki, and quite close to where Surak maps had that rejigging or the change in mapping. So that could be what that is referring to, and find that other name of that other place. So I'm not sure where this Tyrpinsk is, and whether it's in that particular area. But anyway, that's a Dachi area, I presume. Although you've got Dachi here, that's with Y. So yeah, anywhere around here, it could be that the Ukrainians are having some success there. Right, then moving on from Surak maps, we come to just War Monitor here saying Ukrainian loitering munitions hit and destroyed a BTR armored vehicle and an assault group of Russian forces north of Pidstepny. So this is close to the Kozachi Lahiri area, Pidstepny. So there's activity hitting. There'll be lots of drones from both sides hitting targets all around the Dnipro River, of course. So you'd expect that kind of activity. It's nothing particularly special. And then this is no report saying in the Kherson region, Russians accounts more often report about increased Ukrainian activity. Pro-Russian account Romanov, we haven't heard from for some time, even claims that an offensive is starting tomorrow on several places along the Dnipro River. We've heard these rumors a number of times recently. They're still there, and I think I think there is a build-up of Ukrainian troops here, but I think that I think that part of the plan would have been that there would have been this offensive across the river had there been a greater success up here in Zaporizhia. And so without this success in Zaporizhia, you've got a force build up here that isn't quite ready to do what they had planned to do. So whether they are going to attack across here, so you might have Russians seeing a build up of these forces and going, well, they're ready for a bigger counteroffensive in this area, but it might be contingent upon success here, and you're not going to get, I don't think, quick success here that would lead them to do this high risk attack across the river and try and do some pincer maneuver. I'm not sure that they have the weight of forces to be able to do that. No reports have previously said. Pro-Russian account Romanov claims that Ukrainian units aim to start an offensive on the 10th in the Kherson region towards occupied Oleshki, Holopristan and Novokakhovka in order to reach the Crimean border. It still might be worthwhile doing that because, you know, the defences aren't... There are trench lines all around here, but they're not as substantial as the ones up in Zaporizhia. And they might have some success irrespective of what goes on in Zaporizhia if they do this. It depends. There are certain claims that the Russians have, you know, removed a lot of their forces from here to support their Zaporizhian defense. So it might be an opportune time for the Ukrainians to do that, but they would need to be able to get across. They need to bridge this river, which is quite considerable, and it's oftentimes not just the main river, but you've then got smaller rivers. So you need quite a bit of equipment to get your equipment across. And how can you do that quickly? Do you have the ability to do that in order to support a kind of combined arms initiative in the area? So I don't know how doable that really is and how expensive it might be for Ukrainian forces. Anyway, that's what's going on, broadly speaking, across the front line. I mean, there's a claim from ISW about this area that Russian sources continue to discuss Ukrainian operations around that area of the Dnipro River, and that mill bloggers are claiming that the Ukrainians are consolidating positions in the delta, but other claims that they don't have a serious bridgehead in the area across the river, but they still hold positions near the Antonivsky Bridge, and reconnaissance units occasionally venture to Oleshki using the bridge as a cover. So yeah, that's all going on. Right, hopefully that was of some use. That's like a 2-day catch up there, so sorry if it took a little bit longer. Really appreciate all your support. Take care, and check out the live I'm going to be doing later with the volunteers in Ukraine. I think it's going to be a pretty good live. That I think we're going to hear quite a lot from, particularly Anton, who I think has a lot of experience and you know is a good mind to mine for experience and anecdotes and knowledge about what's going on. So be sure to tune into that. Anyway, in the meantime, take care. Speak soon.